Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. An Ontario MP says a number of medical professionals he's spoken to say COVID-19 case counts in hospitals are not what governments want you to believe. Federal Conservative leader Erin O'Toole says Prime Minister Justin Trudeau should fire his defense minister. He will explain why. And we hear from Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman, who explains why our city may keep the face covering bylaw even as more of the province reopens.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Independent Ontario MP Derek Sloan has spoken out about the pandemic. The one-time Conservative Member of Parliament says he's had a number of doctors, nurses, and others in the medical field who've been censored from telling what they have seen during the COVID-19 pandemic. He says the truth needs to be told.
One of the first whistleblowers to reach out to me was a concerned nurse who has spent over 20 years working in a hospital in my riding of Hastings, Lennox, and Addington. For her own protection, I will not name her today. When she reached out to my office, it was to inform me that the local hospital she worked in was experiencing very low numbers of COVID patients. That is, until they took in many patients from Toronto hotspots, which artificially raised the number of COVID patients in our community in a way that was not accurately reflected in the local media reports to the public. It made it look like locally we had a lot more active cases than we truly had. This type of fear-mongering in media reports has been a major issue of concern throughout this pandemic. Even worse, this nurse informed me that many of the sick patients had in fact already been vaccinated. This was not something we were hearing from our local health officials in local media reports.
Sloan says many nurses have not said anything publicly because the College of Nurses in Ontario was threatening anyone who spoke out about what was transpiring in their hospitals. Alberta Health Services says a person who died from the COVID-19 Delta variant at the Foothills Hospital in Calgary had received 2 doses of vaccine. The health agency says the patient, who was over 80 and had acquired the virus, first identified in India while in hospital. The agency says another patient who had not been vaccinated also died after becoming infected. So far, 21 patients and 9 healthcare workers have contracted COVID-19 from 2 outbreaks at the hospital. All are believed to be the Delta variant. Meanwhile, the rate of people on the prairies getting a first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine appears to be slowing down and hovering around 70%. Dr. Philippe Lagacé-Wiens from St. Boniface Hospital in Winnipeg says a saturation point has been reached with first shots. Tim Caulfield, who specializes in health law from the University of Alberta, says he too is seeing the same trend in our province. Both men say those who have not yet been vaccinated include pandemic deniers and those who face mobility, cultural, or social economic barriers. The Alberta government is trying to incentivize more Albertans to get the COVID-19 vaccine jabs by having the Open for Summer lottery, which includes 3 $1 million cash prizes along with 40 vacation packages. So for our poll question this week, we're asking you, do you agree with the Alberta government holding a COVID-19 vaccine lottery? Make sure you log on to bridgecitynews.ca and let us know your thoughts. We will have the results from the poll for you on Friday evening's newscast. Ottawa says 1 million free doses of Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine are being flown to Canada from the United States. They're part of our southern neighbors' promise to donate 80 million vaccine doses to other countries by the end of the month. 15% of eligible Canadians are fully vaccinated, and around 75% now have had their first dose. Federal Conservative leader Erin O'Toole has accused Defence Minister Harjit Sajjan of covering up sexual misconduct allegations in the military. He says if the Prime Minister does not fire Sajjan, the voters of Vancouver South should.
Throwing Admiral Mark Norman under the bus, misleading Canadians. Do we want to hear more? Because the Liberal caucus seems to forget, Mr. Speaker. He bought used fighter jets. He cut benefits to our troops fighting ISIS. He cut health care for military members. He cut defense spending. He's all but eliminated Canadian peacekeeping. And, of course, for 3 years, he covered up sexual misconduct allegations in the Canadian Armed Forces. The Canadian Armed Forces need leadership. When will this Prime Minister fire his Defence Minister?
We know that we have a lot more work to do, and we will get it done. And Mr. Speaker, it was their government that cut from defense with the strategic review, the defense reduction action plan that they had. We as a party have put over 70% increase into the defense budget, Mr. Speaker, and we have outlined it for 20 years. And we know that we have a lot more work to do to look after our Canadian Armed Forces members, and we will get it done. Thank you.
Lethbridge West MLA Shannon Phillips had a scare earlier today. She posted on our Facebook page that around 2 o'clock Thursday morning, she was awoken when someone pounded on her door and rang her doorbell. She says a drug-intoxicated person wanted to get in, tried to get in. I told them to leave, they wouldn't. I called 911. The offender was unfazed, just stayed on my porch, and eventually, as I described the situation to the excellent and patient 911 operator, he left. MLA Shannon Phillips says police arrived at her door around 10 minutes later after she placed the call. Phillips, who's had issues with the Lethbridge Police Service in the past, says even though the LPS scare her, last night she needed them because, quote, we have a drug crisis in our city. A project that MLA Shannon Phillips and many other NDP members have been against may not be moving forward. A review panel for the Alberta Energy Regulator has denied the provincial application for the Grassy Mountain Coal Project, saying it is not in the public interest. The panel says the initiative would result in adverse environmental effects on surface water quality. In a joint statement, Energy Minister Sonia Savage and Environment and Parks Minister Jason Nixon said the protection of our lands and water remains of critical importance as we develop our natural resources. We are continuing the process of widespread public engagement to inform the province's long-term approach to coal, and we'll have more to say on water quality management in the days ahead. The easing of what has seemed like endless restrictions and rules is a cause for celebration. Now, getting out to dance is much needed for both our physical and mental health. Children with the Blood Tribe First Nation got that opportunity Thursday morning. BCN's Naveen Day was in standoff and has the story.
It happened for the first time in 15 months. Dance. And it's what children love to do. I'm at the Honoring Life Children's Dance Competition in Standoff. Organizer Verona Tailfeathers says the event is all about improving mental health among our youth.
The event is so important today because honoring life is really the term. We don't use the term suicide prevention. We use the term honoring life because we honor our lives. And I think historically our young people were taking the term suicide and utilizing it as an option out of life, which is not right.
This is a foundational way to ensure that children are connected, that they're supported, and that adults and elders and those drummers and singers are part of their ongoing support as they journey through youth and into adulthood.
The competition is not only fun for the kids, it is an exercise in freedom to dance, something that Indigenous people have not always had. Merle Spearchief is a residential school survivor where dancing was not allowed. She says it is important for new generations to know their identity.
They had to dance in secret and do their ceremonies in secret. Otherwise, they got in trouble by the government. The trauma that we endured, we don't want them to go through that. And part of that is to learn their identity, roots, where they came from. And so that's why it's so important for kids to know our culture and our traditions.
The Children's Dance event is one of 9 events that are part of the Blood Tribe's Honoring Life project. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Well, you'll see a change when you head to the polls this fall for the upcoming municipal election in our city. Voters will be able to cast a ballot at any polling station across Lethbridge. Instead of having dedicated voting stations like years before, anyone can vote at a station of their choosing. The city clerk for the city of Lethbridge, Bonnie Hilford, says this is the first time in Alberta that this initiative has been done.
We looked at the legislation and our bylaw and saw that, because we don't have a ward system here in Lethbridge, or the city of Red Deer doesn't either, that we're not, prescribed to do voting in a certain community or, in a certain area, that we actually are able to vote anywhere. It does take a little bit more planning, and we want to make sure that voting stations, the popular ones, don't have long lineups, or if they do, that we do have this web tool that people can go somewhere else and vote conveniently.
The municipal elections will take place in October. Children who have never registered for hockey before are about to lace up their skates. The First Shift program allows kids to be introduced to hockey for the first time and have a little bit of fun. Micah Quinn has the details.
The program and registration is run through Hockey Canada, and then the Lethbridge Minor Hockey Association steps in to implement it. This is the 8th year that the association is putting on the First Shift program, and 30 kids will join in.
We use paid instructors. It's a 6-week program, and they get from head to toe, they get full equipment. And that's brought on by NHLPA and Bauer, and the instructors are supplied by us. The ice is supplied by Lethbridge Minor. And we give them a 6-week program. If we see that they want to keep going or there's enthusiasm to keep going, we run another 6-week program after Christmas in January.
Hitchcock says 30 to 40% of the kids sign up for the program again the following year.
We get 90% signing up for the second 6 weeks. We get 35 to 40% that go into mainstream hockey, as they call it, which is one of the reasons for the program, but it's also there just to offer a low-cost way and a small introduction way to get kids into hockey.
At the end of the 6 to 12 weeks, games are played to show off the skills of the new hockey stars. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The Trudeau government announced a new proposal in 2020 for the 2021 through 2023 immigration level plan. The government is looking to bring in 1.2 million immigrants into Canada to help the economy recover from the pandemic. Najib Mongal from Lethbridge Family Services says he's hopeful that the organization will be ready to help out these newcomers.
We are always in communication with our funders, and they share information with us and stats and the flow of newcomers to different jurisdictions. So we were hoping that we will be ready for the flow of newcomers in upcoming years, and we do recognize the needs for different categories, and we're adding services to meet that need and that gap within the community.
The plan is focusing on economic growth, with 60% of admissions coming from the economic class. The University of Lethbridge research projects were supported with more than $3.7 million in new funding as the Government of Canada announced a major investment in Canadian science, engineering, social studies, and humanities research. The Associate Vice President of Research at the U of L says with the extra cash, more research can be explored by students.
Here at the University of Lethbridge, we have a really, really strong tradition of involving undergraduates in our research as well. So there'll be parts of these projects where undergraduates will be able to participate, and some of that funding will provide stipends or other kinds of pay for those students as well, so that we can really give everybody a taste of what research is like, but also involving all those different perspectives gives us different insights about where we can go with the research and how it can connect to different things in the community, for instance.
A total of $365 million to support more than 4,800 lead researchers across Canada was dished out by the federal government. Are you looking for a way to keep your kids busy this summer? Lethbridge College has announced registration is now open for their summer camps. They include everything from carpentry to welding to learning about the ecosystem and technologies, all the way to Kodiak sports camps. A spokesperson from Lethbridge College says once Alberta hit stage 2 of the reopening plan, day camps were given the green light.
Really, when we entered phase 2, the government said that summer day camps were available. So we kind of had them on the back burner. At times we were ready to move ahead. Then we had to say, no, we can't do this. And then finally, when we entered into phase 2, it became obvious that we could run them. And so we just got everybody together and made it happen. We'll obviously have to follow any COVID protocols, but other than that, just fun, exciting things that are rooted in our areas of expertise.
For a full list of camps and to register, visit lethbridgecollege.ca. 90s shows may not be the most popular topic with teenagers in the year 2021, but a school in Lethbridge has put its own spin on the classic Fresh Prince of Bel-Air theme song. Carson Marzouk has the details.
With the COVID-19 pandemic forcing students to be in class cohorts this year, one group of students at GS Lakey Middle School wasn't going to let that stop them from creating their own version of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air theme song.
In Lethbridge, Alberta, born and raised at Lakey was where I spent most of my days.
Christy Legg is the teacher and director of the music video. She says the project was in collaboration with one of their classes.
They didn't have their option class, they had an activity class. And this group that I had, they really wanted to make a music video. We're finding now that a lot of students this age are watching some of the same shows that we watch, a lot of the teachers watch, thanks to streaming platforms.
Students created their own lyrics and dance moves throughout the month-long process, with some of the meetings taking place on Zoom. Blake says along with the students, different staff and community members joined in on the fun.
It was neat to see some of their staff and teachers and superintendent and resource officers in a little different setting. They were all great sports about it, including our superintendent, Cheryl Gilmore. She played a role.
One of the students featured in the video, Marley Clark, says the process took a lot of trial and error before the final product was recorded.
It was extremely fun to do, and there was a lot of different experiments that we did with it. There was a lot of practicing, and I really like to see the final result.
Lake adds the goal of the video is to create a positive experience for the students and to lift their spirits.
Bring positive vibes and just help the students feel like they got to accomplish something and have a performance opportunity even though it was virtual.
For Bridge City News, I'm Carson Marsouk.
Well, we enjoyed a lot of dry, hot sunshine over the last few days, but that's about to change. A low-pressure system with a little bit of rain is on its way to Lethbridge. Full weather details are coming up. We have enjoyed quite a bit of sunshine over the past few days, but it appears as though some moisture may be on the way. Jeanette Roche is here now with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, we should see some rain just in time for the weekend?
Yeah, just one more nice day in the forecast before the rain starts to fall this weekend. Those 60-kilometer-per-hour wind gusts sticking around for a little while as well. We had those today, and we're going to be experiencing them this evening as well. Into tomorrow, though, warm and sunny. Look at that. 26 degrees the high. Sunshine. It's going to be a lovely day tomorrow. And then, like I said, the rain starting on the weekend. We're looking at a 60% chance for both a Saturday and a Sunday. Saturday's high 22, Sunday's high 18, and then we are climbing up to 25 for Monday. Look at that. Next week, as soon as we get past that weekend, it starts to get warm and sunny again. 28 on Tuesday, up to 30 degrees on Wednesday, under sunny skies. So we just got to get a rainy weekend out of the way, and then we're back up to summer, basically. Speaking of summer, summer solstice coming soon. We're going to be looking at the longest day of the year. Average high for this time of year, 23. 9 degrees was our average low. 32 was our high temperature back in 1988. And in 2000, we had our chilliest day on record, which was 1 degree. Sun rose this morning at 5:23 a.m. and it's going to be setting at 9:42 p.m. So giving us 16 hours and 19 minutes of daylight, 1 minute longer than it was yesterday, as summer solstice slowly approaching, coming up, I believe, on Sunday. It's going to be the longest day of the year. 22 the high in Vancouver, Victoria, 21 lots of sunshine, a bit windy in the Juan de Fuca Strait, 23 in Edmonton and 25 in Calgary. Both of those cities under lots of sunshine, not too much wind, so it's going to be a lovely summer day. Saskatoon, 22 degrees the high. Looking at a 30% chance of showers there. Regina, 22, lots of sunshine and windy, cloudy and windy in Winnipeg tomorrow. 20 degrees is their high. Over in the central part of the country, Toronto, going to be experiencing some showers later on in the morning. 24 the high. Chance of showers as well tomorrow in Ottawa. 27 the high. 28 in Montreal with a mix of sun and clouds. Should be a lovely day there as well. Over on the East Coast, Fredericton, sunshine, 27. The high can be lovely. 25 in Halifax, 24 in Charlottetown, sunny skies, 22 in St. John's, Newfoundland with a mix of sun and cloud and a bit windy as well. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
You may have noticed that gas has gone up 6 to 7 cents a litre in many parts of your area. Now, to explain why this is happening is Dan McTagg. Dan is the president of Canadians for Affordable Energy. Dan, bottom line, why the huge increase?
Well, we've seen oil move up a little bit on markets, pushing up towards $72 a barrel, but that's really been offset by the strength of the Canadian dollar. It may be a surprise to many Canadians that the more oil we sell, especially the United States, the stronger our dollar gets, and that makes our purchasing power for everything, including gasoline, that much more desirable. The problem, however, is that this 6 cent increase that I'm seeing is almost entirely gas stations across Alberta. So not just here in Lethbridge, but I saw this in Edmonton earlier in the week, spread over to Calgary. Now it's here in Lethbridge. It's happening in Medicine Hat, Red Deer, pretty much across the province, where gas stations are now charging 18-cent retail margins. That's 18 cents a liter. 12 is considered extraordinary. Many of them have struggled with 6 or 7.
Thanks so much, Dan. That was Dan McTagg, president of Canadians for Affordable Energy. 2 energy companies are launching a project they say will form the backbone of Alberta's carbon capture, utilization, and storage industry. Pembina Pipeline and TC Energy plan to develop a carbon transportation system that's capable of transporting more than 20 million tons of carbon dioxide a year. Now, to speed up the project and to keep costs in check, they plan to retrofit existing pipelines and build new systems to connect Alberta's largest sources of industrial emissions to a site northeast of Redwater. Loblaw is expanding its PC Optimum loyalty program at Esso gas stations. Starting early next year, Optimum members can earn and redeem points for rewards, including fuel and car washes when they fill up their tanks. Since Loblaw and Imperial Oil teamed up in 2018, members could just earn points when buying gas at Esso stations. Imperial is going to retire its Esso Extra program and says its members will be able to convert existing points to PC Optimum. Ford's outlook for the second quarter improved as the automaker is seeing strong customer service reservations for 4 of its vehicles. The company now anticipates its quarterly adjusted earnings to top its expectations and be a lot better than a year ago. Although there's still some uncertainty around semiconductor supply, Ford is seeing an improvement in its automotive business due to lower than expected costs and favorable market factors. It is also being helped by increased vehicle auction values. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 86 points on the day to finish at 20,144. The Dow was down 210 points to 33,823. The S&P 500 was down 1 point to 4222, and the Nasdaq was up 121 points on the day to 14,161. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.11 to $71.04 US per barrel. Natural gas was unchanged at $3.25 US. Gold was up 5 cents to $17.7355 US an ounce, and silver was even at $25.91 US an ounce. Wheat is at $332 per metric ton, barley's at $338, canola's at $666, and corn is at $395 per metric ton. Live cattle were down $2.20 to $120.10, feeder cattle were down 30 cents to $157.40, and lean hogs were down $4.50 to $111. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to $80.93 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Ottawa says 1 million donated doses of Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine are being flown to Canada from the United States. They're part of our southern neighbors' promise to donate 80 million vaccine doses to other countries by the end of the month. 15% of eligible Canadians are fully vaccinated, and around 75% have now had their first dose. So why has Lethbridge City Council decided to keep the face covering bylaw for now, even though it appears as though most of the pandemic restrictions will be lifted soon by the province? Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman will have the answer for us in just a moment. The province's Open for Summer plan is well underway, including patios being reopened at restaurants once again. So nice to see that, enjoying the sunshine. Premier Jason Kenney says if the COVID-19 numbers continue to decline, which we've seen a lot of lately, and more Albertans are vaccinated, we can fully reopen by July. Now, what will that look like for the city of Lethbridge? To talk about this in more detail is Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman. Chris, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Great to be here, Hal.
Now, first of all, let's talk about Canada Day. Big party. We're celebrating our country's birthday once again. Is there enough time for the city to plan a bit of a celebration?
In a word, no. We won't be able to host the big party that we usually have at Henderson Lake Park, and we won't be able to host the fireworks in the evening where we've had 5,000 people. Those events take some lengthy planning and also ordering of supplies. Right now, we're just encouraging people to participate at home. They can order a barbecue in a box from the Interfaith Food Bank until June the 25th and have that on Canada Day. They can attend the Indigenous events at the Yates on June the 27th. There will be a series of things that are put on by community groups where people can be safe and spread out and still participate in celebrations that they choose.
Now, how about Whoop Up Days? Have you talked to the folks at the X? I mean, it sounds like the Calgary Stampede is a go in a reduced capacity. How about our festival?
Well, it will be a challenge this year, Hal, because of the construction that's happening for the AGRI-FOOD hub. And having construction on site and having several thousand people would be a challenge. I think additionally, we're looking at using a touring company that generally comes through the States with people who maybe with that, who may need special clearance, and that would take additional planning. Generally, it's up to the Lethbridge exhibition to organize that, but I think they've got a lot on their plate this year, and we might be celebrating differently.
Now, Council recently voted 5-4 to not repeal the mandatory face covering bylaw. Let me ask you something. Why keep the masks on when much of the province is reopening, especially with case counts coming down here in the South Zone and close to 70% of Albertans being vaccinated? Why cover up?
Well, Lethbridge is a service center. We're a hub. And while the numbers are impressive for Lethbridge, the areas around us are not really, they're about 50% as successful as the city of Lethbridge. So we're seeing vaccine take-ups in the 30% level. Now those people are coming into Lethbridge, they're buying things, they're involved in our community, attending our retail stores. We've got frontline workers who would be exposed to them. These people may not be vaccinated at all, and they are least likely to wear masks. So that puts people at risk. And you have to remember there are people in the city of Lethbridge who have immune compromised situations. And we have young people, 12 years of age and younger, who will not be eligible for the vaccines. So, we have to take every precaution possible until we're sure, absolutely sure, that this pandemic is under control.
And you've had your jab, right? You want to show me the sweatshirt? Maybe show our viewers there at home?
Yeah, I've got, I've done it, and I'm happy to promote it to others. And I think it's the best way that I can return to a normal life. I'm looking forward to seeing my grandkids. I'm looking forward to traveling. And I have two of my kids live in other countries. And I'm hoping that by the fall or spring next year, I'll be able to have a more normal life. And I'm looking forward to that. And we're seeing now the signs that people who don't have vaccines may not be welcome in other countries, and their ability to function may be limited.
Now, Council voted unanimously recently to advance the Indigenous placemaking strategy a year ahead of schedule. Can you explain exactly what this is all about? And will this potentially mean maybe name changes to certain areas of the city, including Indian Battle Park?
Yes, when the 215 graves were discovered in Kamloops, and then subsequently there've been a couple of others, and there may be some in this area as well. Certainly, based on the stories we're hearing from the Blackfoot people, there certainly is a possibility that we will uncover some similar things. Having said that, we have to take a look at what we were planning to do anyway and say, well, maybe there needs to be greater urgency to that. We were going to have an assessment of the sensitivity of some names that we're using in the city of Lethbridge, and those may be up for discussion. So we've heard about Indian Battle Heights, we've heard about possibly Micmac Boulevard. What about Whoop Up Drive? We've got Indian Battle Park. So I think what we need to have is a consultation process. I don't think we want to jump into any quick fixes. We want to make sure that any solutions that we come up with, we do in collaboration with the Blackfoot people in this area. So that process will begin. We'll identify some of the areas that need to be looked at and some of the names that need to be looked at, and have a community conversation about how do we go forward from here.
Now, there are many business owners who've had to close their doors for good during the pandemic and the lockdowns. Tell me about some of those business owners and families you've spoken to who've been severely impacted very hard during the COVID-19 pandemic. Their livelihoods are gone.
Yeah, we hope that their livelihoods will come back. I was very concerned that they didn't receive the provincial supports and funding and federal funding supports that they needed. And we heard about Mocha Cabana being disqualified from receiving federal funding. I thought, wow, that's a big problem. We mainly restaurants, fitness facilities, of course. Fitness facilities were going great guns, in our city. People were really into fitness, and then COVID hit. I think in the last 3 years, the number of new businesses that started out that were fitness related were phenomenal. And of course, that's a big investment, and people had leases, those types of things. And it's been a big challenge for both restaurants and fitness facilities and many others. So these are people in our community. I hope that we can get back to normal, and we can do that safely so that these businesses can open and stay open.
Alberta Justice Minister Casey Medu said there were some deficiencies with the plan put forward by Lethbridge Police Chief Shaheen Medizadeh to clean up the Lethbridge Police Force. Now, have you spoken with the chief about what some of these potential deficiencies are?
I have to be very careful because elected politicians cannot direct the police. So we have a police commission whose prime responsibility is to oversee the response. I fully support the police chief. I believe that he is a very honorable man. He's very well intentioned. He's very well qualified, and he has over 30 years experience with the RCMP before coming to the city of Lethbridge. So this is someone looking at Lethbridge Police Services with fresh eyes. I don't think we could have a better person doing the job. I think some of the processes that we're dealing with, and I was frustrated when I was a member of the police commission, that there were many cases that took so long to resolve. And I think the public's frustrated with that as well, that an incident occurs and it takes a year and a half or so to actually come to a resolution. And what we have is a process, it's a provincial process, which has a bottleneck. And these cases are not being handled effectively and efficiently, in my opinion. But I understand due process, and it's a quasi-legal process, and often anyone who has been accused of not doing the job the way they were supposed to, perhaps even breaking the law themselves, is entitled to legal representation. And we all know that legal cases take a long time, and the cases have to be prepared appropriately. So that does create frustrations. In terms of the culture, our Minister of Justice suggested that there was a cultural issue at the Lethbridge Police Services, and I believe that the Chief of Police is addressing that. He's making sure that people have the appropriate training and that those training programs are in place to ensure that people are aware of what they should and should not do. So I believe the police chief, Chief Medizadeh, is doing a great job in terms of responding. And if there's some additional information that the Minister of Justice requires, I'm sure the police chief and the police commission will supply it.
Now, we keep hearing instances of more and more drug houses popping up in our city, then shut down by SCAN and the Alberta Sheriffs. But then a week later, another one pops up maybe a few houses down the road. What's being done to end this vicious cycle?
Well, it does depend a lot on neighborhoods and neighborhood cooperating with the SCAN unit. We've always advocated for more resources in the city of Lethbridge, including having a permanent SCAN unit in Lethbridge. The SCAN unit generally comes down from Calgary and comes down on an occasional basis when they have enough evidence, and it can take 6 months to 12 months to gather enough information to shut down a drug house. So to have them shut down and have another one pop up 2 blocks away within a week is frustrating. But the only way to solve that is to have ongoing resources right here in the city of Lethbridge, where drug houses are addressed on a constant basis. And there's a regular presence of SCAN in the city itself.
Now let's talk about something a little more positive here. Have you had a chance to take in the farmers market at Lethbridge Exhibition Park? Is it busy? Are people happy that it's finally back?
I think people were a little bit nervous at the beginning, and they went out of their way to post regulations and what people had to do. They made it very clear with the signing. And I think that the farmers market is another fun event that people can attend in order to make use of local vendors and support the local economy. So yeah, I'm thrilled to support the farmers market. And it always was a social thing for me, and I always have to be a little bit careful. I have to set an example as well that, I just can't go up and converse people up, with people 2 feet away from their face anymore, or hug people that I see. So it's a little bit of a different experience, and I'm hoping that one day we can get back to the way things were.
Now let's talk a bit about the Agri-Food Hub and Trade Center, which you touched on earlier here at Exhibition Park. How's it coming along so far with the construction? And do you know, is it on budget?
It's early days, and I know that there are struggles with supplies. Maintaining construction schedules is going to be challenging as we recover. We're seeing significant inflation in terms of some supplies, steel and lumber. And we hope that these things can be managed. And sometimes in order to manage costs, what you have to do is accept delivery delays. So this potentially could take longer than we anticipate, but I know they're doing their best to manage and contain the costs as well as keep it on budget. But this is a situation that's being managed all over North America right now.
Well, you know what? I agree. I mean, I'm rebuilding my mother's deck right now. The cost of lumber is 4 times the price that it was last year. Even a sheet of plywood is over $200 now. It's just 4x8 sheet of plywood. It's incredible. Lethbridge Transit, let's talk a bit about that here for a moment, launched its new CityLink network. Explain what that will really mean for transit riders here in our city.
Well, what we want to do is find creative ways of identifying efficiencies in transit. So the big challenge we have is we're basically subsidizing transit by about 90 cents on the dollar. So how do we be fair to people who rely on transit as their only means of transportation? So many people who drive cars every day say, whoa, we're just subsidizing transit. It's just not worth it. But if transit is your only means of transportation, we have to make sure that those citizens have a quality of life. And it's not as convenient. They can't jump in a car and go to Costco or go to Walmart. They have to follow the bus schedule. It takes them 2 or 3 times as long as anybody in a car. But that's their way of life. There are people who are visually impaired, for example, who rely on the buses. It's important to make sure that we include and accommodate everybody in the city, and it has to be affordable as well. So it's who we are as a city. So the new programs are, what can we do to find efficiencies? How can we have main routes which are more common in terms of access, and how can we use less frequent routes to allow people to access the bus from outlying areas or extended areas within residential subdivisions? So we're trying to draw a balance there, trying to do some new things. We've got new people in transit looking at new plans, and we're hoping to create efficiencies up to $350,000 and provide some benefits to taxpayers while not undermining the service to those who need it.
Now that the weather is finally warming up, we may begin seeing more of our homeless and the homeless issue here in our city. What's the city doing to address the homeless issue here in Lethbridge? And explain perhaps how you're working with nonprofits such as Streets Alive and the food banks to help those most vulnerable.
Well, we tried to reallocate the funding that we were providing to a whole variety of organizations in the past. So last fall, we reallocated $6 million, and we tried to target areas that would possibly have the most success in addressing the social issues in the city. While that's occurring, we've also formed a community well-being and safety strategy, and we're getting input and getting assistance with where should certain services go. How should we address that going forward in the future? The accusation has been the city has no plan. And I'm sympathetic to hearing that. Whenever we've tried to move forward or an organization has tried to move forward, it's met with resistance from neighborhoods. So how do we provide the services? Where do they go? And rather than having the politicians trying to come up with solutions, we're now involving community groups in what those solutions might look like. And I think as the process has begun, many people who thought the solutions were simple are now understanding that they're a lot more complex than they thought they were. So I look forward to people who are directly involved and have a passion for this, helping us come forward with the solutions that we need to implement going forward to address this serious issue in our city.
Yeah, no easy answers, absolutely. Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman, thanks so much for your time today.
Well, it's always been a pleasure. Al, we're running out of times to meet. Got maybe 3 more. So I've always enjoyed it and look forward to talking with you again through the summer and up until the municipal election.
Well, as we grow older and retirement age begins to approach, most of us turn our thoughts to how much money will I need to live out the rest of my life. But are there far more important issues to consider when it comes to retirement? Well, joining us today is Alex Lippert, one of the co-founders of Steadfast Wealth, a company which has assets under advisement of nearly $1 billion. He is also the co-author of the book After Work, an honest discussion about the retirement lie and how to live a future worthy of dreams. He's joining us from Colorado Springs. Welcome to Bridge City News, Alex. So great to have you on today.
Yeah, thanks so much. Great to be here.
Yeah, well, like what an interesting title for a book. Can you maybe tell, first of all, you don't look anywhere close to retirement age yourself, but so how did you come to write this book? You're obviously a financial planner. You work with people close to retirement, right?
Yeah, so being a financial planner now for almost 11 years, it's really led to so many just direct observations and a lot of insights into folks' kind of psychological side as they approach and, get into retirement and kind of what happens beyond the financial side. The financial piece of the equation is really important. Obviously, that's my career. But time after time, there were so many folks who, they have all of the financial side covered completely. They don't have any problems, living out their lives, doing whatever they want to do from a financial standpoint. But a lot of them end up unhappy and find themselves lost in retirement. And that's a curiosity that I wanted to explore with the book. And so that's kind of the genesis of the book.
Sounds like it. So in the book, you mentioned the retirement lie. So can you tell us what the retirement lie is? What does our cultural mindset get wrong about retirement?
Yeah, the retirement lie is that a withdrawn, kind of self-centered one is a good one. So there's this narrative that permeates our society that says, hey, you've put in time, you've put in effort, you've raised children, you've poured into other people's lives, you've poured into the company that you've worked for, your entire career. Now it's time for you. Now it's time to sail off into the sunset and vacation and play golf and all these different things that are fun that I think do have a place in your life. But I think, that cannot be the entree. That can only be the garnish. The fun stuff can be the garnish, but you really need to focus on purpose and fulfillment and, finding work after work, even if it's not quote unquote work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Well, you mentioned right off the top, it's psychological too. Now, you regularly advise people about financial planning for retirement. Obviously, that's what you do. And you've heard of a lot of personal stories, I'm sure, as you've come to know your clients over the years. But once people retire and have a lot of free time on their hands, do they often lose their sense of purpose, perhaps part of their identity?
Yes, they absolutely do. And I think it takes a lot of intentional thought before stepping away from work or before becoming an empty nester. Some of these milestone moments where you've been busy, and even if you haven't necessarily been fulfilled, you're almost tricked into thinking you're fulfilled just because there's so much on your plate in any one given time. But as soon as you step out of that kind of life madness, if you will, and into that time where you do have all of this extra time, if you're not intentional about, where am I going and what's my next purpose center, like where am I going to feel that, like I did a lot of good work today, regardless of what that work is, where is that going to come from?
Yeah, there comes that sense of purpose and meaning, and back to the lie. So how do people get out of that lie, so to speak?
Yeah, well, the first step I think, is just to examine the word retire and retirement. I mean, you come up with a lot of interesting synonyms, retreat, withdraw. I mean, all of these words that sound terrible, right? So don't think about retirement as retirement. Think about retirement as a graduation. I mean, when we have a college student graduating, think about how many horizons are open to them. Like the world is waiting for them to go get it. And I think you need to think through that same lens. I mean, this is a graduation from one season, which could have been a fantastic career, raising children, all of these great things. But this next season of your life can be the most impactful of your life because you have the most financial resources, presumably. You absolutely have the most time of your life, and you have the most experience and wisdom. And so all of these things culminate into this like beautiful combination of you have so much potential. So go out and live it, and your life is going to be transformed, but you're also going to transform the community, your family members, everybody around you at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you mentioned synonyms earlier, because when I was researching for this interview, I actually did a synonym search on the word retirement. And you're right, words like loneliness and isolation came up. Like there were some really negative things that I would never have even thought of. And I'm like, that's not what retirement means to me. But I think you're right. I think people do find themselves in that. So what is the key to to pursue that purposeful retirement? What's the key to that?
Yeah, so in the book After Work, we walk through 10 different keys, and they're all very different. So awe, having a sense of awe is one. Purpose is obviously kind of the gravity that everything revolves around. But I think sometimes it's helpful to have a deathbed conversation with yourself now. So fast forward your life, think that you've lived, this long, happy life, quote unquote, happy, right? And you look back and, what would you regret spending more time doing? And what would you regret really hoping that you had spent more time doing? So would you look back and say, man, I wish I would have spent, time playing more pickleball or having more happy hour with friends? Or would you say, I wish I would have spent more time with my grandchildren, teaching them how to fish, or painting, with my children, or whatever it is, or starting a nonprofit and volunteering more and making an impact in somebody else's life. There's so many different things that you can do in this approach, and I think that it's very unique to any one given person. So it's hard to say, hey, here's the roadmap. Do X, Y, Z, and you'll feel fulfilled and you'll feel like you're full of purpose, right? But I think if you have that kind of that deathbed conversation with yourself, that really brings into context, what is a fun thing that's fun, but it's not lasting, it's not meaningful in your life, and what is truly meaningful, and then home in on those meaningful aspects of your life and just go get them and just get re-engaged in those however you can.
Mm-hmm. That actually sounds like great advice for anybody to have that conversation so that you can have more of a purpose-driven life, so to speak. Wonderful. There's a lot of wisdom in that, I think. Now, you write about time and structure, of course. So retired people suddenly have more time on their hands, but might be lacking that structure of routine that they once had when they were working, right? So how can they plan and manage their calendar properly?
Yeah, so calendar is an interesting chapter in the book. It's probably the shortest chapter. It's fairly straightforward, but I think a calendar is an interesting tool to use, and not just to fill it with busy stuff, right? Because that defeats the purpose. But I think having a calendar helps you achieve minor goals in any one given day towards some greater goal or undertaking. And so I think not having a calendar and waking up and just winging it in retirement, saying, hey, it's Wednesday, I slept in, I'm enjoying my coffee, and the next month, my entire calendar is just blank. Like that leads to a lot of indecisiveness and inaction, I think. And so I think as you begin to look at retirement, and even just now, as you start to build a calendar, really try to just implement these fulfilling aspects of life. Like we've got a client who seems like he's always fulfilled. He's a fantastic guy. And he writes, hey, I've got this this goal of reading a book every 2 weeks, and I'm reading about all of the presidents, and I'm like doing all of these different interesting things that he's genuinely interested in. And so he actually carves out 2 hours in the morning to read, and so it doesn't have to be this huge goal, start a company and do XYZ and do all of these massive things. It can just be really, really small things. But I think, any audacious kind of big life goal and thing that's going to be really fulfilling is going to be challenging, and it's going to take time and effort. And it's always a culmination of really, really small actions from now until, you've reached your objective. And so I think utilizing the calendar in that way to basically goal set on a really small scale can help you ultimately reach where you want to go.
I would imagine there's sometimes mental health issues can set in retirement. People might find themselves a bit depressed. Do you find that sometimes?
Yeah, the statistics are shocking, actually. I mean, when you look at some of the stats about just retirees, like the divorce rate has tripled for age 65 plus since 1990. This large insurance study done by Cigna found that loneliness is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And a lot of retirees are very lonely because, for one reason or the other, but I think ultimately connection to others is part of our human fabric. And I think that you really need to lean in, however that looks in your own life, and really lean in and stay connected. And there's another study that we mentioned in the book that's about, purposeful connections with others. And it's not about how many connections you have. It's not about being this social butterfly out there with a lot of superficial, relationships, a lot of acquaintances. It's about the depth of your relationships. And so even if there's one person in your life that you have a deep relationship with, how can you make that deeper?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, what advice do you have for viewers to avoid that loneliness gap? I mean, you talk a bit about the importance of connecting with others through serving, of course.
Yeah, I think, generosity is one chapter in the book where we dig into not only financial generosity, but also, donating your time towards a worthy cause. But I think, there's a lot of noise in our lives. And I think the first step really is to try to turn the volume down on all of that noise. I mean, we all have a smartphone in our pocket with, instant news, instant everything about the markets, about your finances, about, this or that. And I think you really need to tone down a lot of the distractions, a lot of the things that we feel like we can control, but we have no control over. And so I think the control, notion in retirement is really interesting, because if you start to take away the things that take up a lot of your mind space that you're trying to control, but you simply can't, then you have a lot more energy to spend on the things that are really important in your life that you can control. Like you can control your health to a certain degree. Like you can choose to live a healthy lifestyle. You can control how much time you dedicate to your friends and family. You can't control what happens in the investment markets, or with, taxes or what have you. And so I think focusing on the right things and just trying to turn down the volume on the things that you can't control helps a lot in that regard.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned health and how you can control that, because your book includes a chapter on some very important, practical, but important things. And you're mentioning that movement and exercise, of course, is one of them. So tell us a bit about why this is pretty important. I mean, we all know it's important to exercise, but I think it's probably good for the mind too.
Yeah, it is. And we chose not to title the chapter exercise because that comes with a certain connotation, right? So we chose movement. And I think the basis there is that, for a healthy body and mind, we just need to be active. I mean, I know some folks who are 90 years old who are out there, walking multiple miles a day, and they've got, bad knees, what have you, but they're out there doing it. And when you have a conversation with them, you're like, wow, I feel like I'm just talking with a peer of mine, not somebody who's lived, more than double my lifetime. But then I also meet folks who are, say, 60, who kind of come off as that classic grandma or grandpa type, who are, unhealthy, having just trouble doing normal everyday things. And I'm like, well, what is the delta there? What's the difference between those two? And I think a big part of it is just movement, having an active lifestyle, going out and doing what you can do. And I think it's really important to remember that it's not about anybody else, with this. I mean, it's not about comparing yourself to the Joneses or anything. It's really just about improving you, right? So being the best you can be. So it's not about comparing yourself to anybody else. It's about, hey, if I walked a mile yesterday and I felt okay, how about a mile and 5 steps more? And then eventually you're going to reach this point where, the stairs aren't a problem anymore and you can carry your own luggage or what have you. I mean, I think it's all about improving when you can and where you can as much as possible.
Absolutely. Sounds like your book has all kinds of nuggets of wisdom for sure. Thanks so much for being with us today, Alex. Alex Lippert is the co-author of the book After Work, available at theafterwork.net.
Thanks so much.
I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.